Hello and welcome to episode 55 of Nature with You. I am your host, Abby. Here, we come together to journey through our shared nature experiences, stories, and interests while learning more about environmental issues and ways to advocate for the natural world. Enjoy this conversation with Brenda. It's very exciting to have you here, and I was wondering if you could introduce yourself to your guests, but also to me, just get to know you a little bit before we dive into some deeper questions and deeper thoughts about nature.
Sure, happy to. So I'm Brenda Sieglitz. I live in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. I was born and raised here. I currently work in conservation for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. I've been there almost 8 years, and this is actually my first full-time nonprofit job. Prior to this, I've always worked in private industry and came to this career a little bit circuitously, a little bit non-traditional than most people. And I'm also a Pennsylvania Master Naturalist. So I've really enjoyed just getting to know Pennsylvania's state parks, our plants, our native plants, through my career, but also on my own time.
Do you currently do anything to share or enhance your connection or experiences with nature?
I'm on Instagram and social media a lot, so I really enjoy just taking pictures of being outside, of trees. We have a backyard garden this year, a vegetable garden, and I've historically not had great success with that. But this year we're rejoicing in many cucumbers and having tomatoes, and so I'm enjoying sharing that. I also geek out over birds. We have a bird buddy. And so I frequently will download those videos and share them out and show them off. So I love sharing the things that just happen in my immediate environment with people, just to show them nature's right here. You don't have to go far. You just have to look out your window. You have to be present. You have to invest a little bit in your yard.
Oh yeah. Has this been something that you've experienced your whole life, or was this like you had an aha moment where it's like, I should really start looking in my own backyard?
I would like to say it was my aha moment, but probably not. My parents were raised me on about a acre plot of land in southern Lancaster County, and they always had a massive garden, and they pretty much fed us from that garden my entire life. My mom is awesome. 78 and still cans her food regularly, still freezes her corn every single year, and that produce lasts them the entire year. And that's how we grew up. And from a very early age, I learned to go out and pick the strawberries and just really get outside. We went on tent camping vacations. So we were very much immersed in nature and being connected to the land from being a child.
I'm curious, with your output of lots of cucumbers and tomatoes, you said that you share with people. Is that something that's a neighborhood thing or your friends and family type thing? And what does that sharing look like, and how does that make you feel?
This past week in our work chat on Teams, someone put up that they had an overload of zucchinis, and I was like, you're in luck. I have an overload of cukes. We bring in and we share the load often with coworkers, but it does happen in the neighborhood as well. We're really fortunate to have some very close neighbors. We have backyard chickens here, and which are allowed. Our neighbors have chickens, and the owners who previously owned our home next to us owned this whole area. It was once a very large farm, and then slowly was divided out amongst the family. Anyways, so we all share the load with each other, and we'll help babysit each other's pets when we go on vacation, which is fantastic. Right. So it's become this really close community of friends and peers, which is wonderful. And then on Instagram, I just love sharing with my friends and my followers that I've built up over the years of various communities that I've been involved in.
What is the difference between kind of the in-person sharing with neighbors or friends or coworkers versus through social media? And how do you find that like fulfillment through both?
The in-person always gives me a different vibration, a different feeling. I remember just leaving those connections and having that energy with me, going, okay, that was a great experience. I'm so glad we have those people in our neighborhood. I'm so glad we have this community. And while I think at one point, probably about 15 or more years ago, I felt that community online as well. We had a really strong, vibrant Twitter community, pre-X community in downtown Lancaster when I lived in downtown Lancaster. And we were able to take it offline to in-person. And we had this amazing in-person community of online people. And I think that's what made it thrive so well. But I don't see that same in-person to online community crossover happening as much anymore. So I'm really bonding with those in-person connections now.
Yeah, that's great. My fiance's family lives in Lancaster, so we've been together for about 6 years at this point. I've really enjoyed spending time there, and it's so different. I'm from Western Pennsylvania, so going from the more mountainous greenery that can be somewhat gloomy to my future mother-in-law, she always says, moving there, it's always sunny at some point of the day, and it makes it so much better. So yeah, I've really loved being there so much now.
I'm so glad that you have that opportunity to see kind of both worlds. I've loved visiting Western Pennsylvania and the Pittsburgh region and all throughout. There's some stunning areas, but there's definitely each part of Pennsylvania has its really different, unique beauty. And I think until people visit here, they have no idea how diverse each area is.
Definitely. My sister and I went on a road trip around Pennsylvania a few years ago.
Yeah.
We went up from where we live in western Pennsylvania to Erie, Presque Isle, and I'm not going to remember each stop, but we also went to Ricketts Glen, maybe?
Oh, stunning. Yes, stunning.
That was amazing. And we ended in Lancaster to visit my fiance, my boyfriend at the time, and we love being on the water, so we were tubing and swimming.
Perfect.
And it was a great trip and really helped us both connect with each other, but with our home state. So we both have traveled, and she's lived in Maui, she's lived in Washington. I feel like that experience will always be extra special because it's where we're from.
I agree. I've moved other places. I've lived in New Jersey. I've lived in Montana, and I've greatly appreciated the scenery of the Western states immensely. But there is something very special about Pennsylvania. And you mentioned Ricketts Glen, and I love the history behind it. It frankly should be one of our national parks. It could have been. But the fact that we have it as a protected state park, and it is such a gem for so many people, I think people just need to go see it for themselves.
For sure. For sure. What natural phenomenon do you find most interesting?
There are a lot. So this question brought me back to, taking me back to what I wanted to do as a kid growing up, honestly, because even though I've grown up in nature and I've been around it, I have not always been comfortable with nature. I was always very fearful of thunderstorms growing up. We lived in the middle of farm fields. My parents purchased a plot of land in the middle of farm fields. It was completely open. And we were at the end of a power line. And actually our house got struck by lightning twice inside the house. And that just made me very scared of storms.
Yes.
And I had an upstairs bedroom, and when the winds would be really bad, it would whistle. And as a little kid, you could make up stories in your head of what that whistle was.
Right.
Fast forward now 30 some years, and I'm like, I love thunderstorms. I've seen some of the most beautiful thunderstorms as I've driven into Montana from Wyoming State. I can picture them in my mind. I've been down at Assateague Seashore. I remember with my brother and us sitting in my old Jeep and watching the thunderstorms come in and flood and just be amazing. And I've developed a lot of respect for them over the years, certainly seeing the destruction they did growing up and the destruction they do now. But I just find them amazing. And actually, as I've watched some of the World Cup coverage, not necessarily of the games, but of the people who are experiencing America for the first time.
Yeah.
Their experiences of our thunderstorms and our lightning and things like that are fantastic. They are also having that, I'm going to use a term that is so dated and weird, but a shock and awe. To me, that is the campaign of American thunderstorms. It is just, they are wild and unruly, and you cannot capture them. And I live right by the Susquehanna River. So now when the storms come over, they sometimes break up. When they hit the river, they can split. So you'll watch the radar and it'll be like red and pink on the radar, and then it'll just dissipate. And then sometimes it'll hit you straight on. And I would say by far thunderstorms and just how that happens.
I think something about thunderstorms that interests me is, I guess, the inability of domesticated animals to be able to understand a thunderstorm. I feel like we as humans have kind of ruined that for them.
I love that you bring that up. We've had dogs for years. We currently have one named Fern, and she is a mix of, she's our Heinz 57 dog. We've had the DNA testing. She's many different things, and she's fairly tolerant of thunderstorms, not fireworks, but thunderstorms. But her sister, who passed away last year, was a beagle and terrified of thunderstorms, would go into a corner, shake. And that was always very hard for me to watch. And similarly, you're like, through the family line, you come from wolves, the stories, but, and the genetic history. But yeah, it's hard to watch that be bred out of them in a lot of ways, that they don't understand these things that should be inherently in them. Yeah, it's very sad to watch, and yeah.
Yeah, and you just want to do everything you can to comfort them, but just gotta wait it out, which is so sad.
Because they do not always want comforted during that time.
No, and even when we pull out their favorite treat, doesn't even matter.
No.
It's the end of the world.
Yes. Yeah. And I relate. I was terrified as a kid when I would hear that whistle. I can visualize it in my head. And what's cool is my parents planted pine trees along that side of the house, and eventually as I got older, the pine trees got tall enough that the window stopped whistling. But when we first moved there, my dad had built the house, and so I was just too little and the trees were too little. But it's also just great symbolism of the protection of trees and why we should have trees, because it helps protect us from things like that. But yeah,
that's a great point.
But there was a period in 10th grade when I had a really fascinating earth sciences teacher, and I really wanted to be a volcanologist. And I was obsessed with volcanoes. So there's still like a part of me that has that tucked in the back of my brain somewhere. But yeah, I think thunderstorms, severe thunderstorms, lightning are something that will always capture me.
It's so cool that you go from being so afraid of something and then, getting a different perspective of it, which they can still be scary, like 100%. And having, like you said, that respect, I think is an accurate portrayal of what nature is like. It's amazing, it's scary, it's demands our respect for a reason. So that's very cool. Thank you for sharing that. And just a little funny side note about volcanoes. My friend and I host a movie series for this podcast, and we recorded it today. We were talking about Moana. For the next one. And we were kind of talking about the fire, water themes that kind of show, and how lava is normally depicted as bad in movies, especially for kids, just for that easy to understand. And we were talking about the lava short that Pixar made. I'm not sure if you've ever watched it. I have to see it
now. I'm gonna have to see it.
Yeah, if you love volcanoes.
I'm gonna look it up right after this.
It's like one of the first depictions of volcanoes in media that are positive, in my opinion. Not even that they're all negative. It's just two volcanoes fall in love. So it's very cute and very Disney Pixar-fied, but I just thought you might enjoy that.
I definitely will, and now I'm really looking forward to that podcast as well, because Moana's become one of my favorite Disney movies. I think because of that, because of the history and the volcanoes.
How has your relationship with the natural world changed throughout your life?
This one has been vast and wide, and I imagine anyone you've had on the podcast before who's answered this question, it's been all over the place. Am I guessing right? Maybe? Yeah.
Yeah. I try to make the questions vague enough that everyone can interpret it with their own perspectives, but yes, feel free to jump around.
I love it. So I'll explain my childhood growing up and tend some things, but at one point I thought I'd go into journalism once I was leaving school, and really honestly just had a couple of years struggling figuring out what I wanted to do in life. I was not good at figuring out that stable line ahead. I didn't have that clear vision that some students have leaving college. And so after the first year of college, going to 2 different colleges, being in 2 different majors, I dropped out and I went to work full time. And during that time, I really started to see nature more. And I actually, right after high school, I traveled with a girlfriend out to California and back. And we had an amazing experience seeing so many different national parks and tenting along the way and just having an amazing experience. That opened my eyes up to the world. And I suddenly saw the natural world as something that wasn't just you recreate in, but you protect. And that was a big switch for me. And I always had that tucked in the back of my mind, but I never quite knew how to make it a career. And I am not strong in the math and sciences. I definitely excel more at English and music and storytelling. And so I never knew how to make these two meet. I went through some really difficult things early in life. My first husband passed away from a rare cancer when I was 24. And shortly after he died, I went outside. It was October, and I went outside and I walked in the woods, and I found that to be one of the most healing things for me in that moment. Him and I did a lot of camping together. We did a lot of travel, and we love nature. But again, I wasn't connected to it in the way of this is my life. It was just something we did. Right. And I think after that, I realized nature is in me. It is part of me. It is part of all of us. And suddenly I shifted that perspective to this is something I should be protecting and caring for and stewarding, because this is helping me get through this really difficult time. And so that was almost 20 years ago now. It'll be 18 years this year since I lost him. And since then, I've been giving talks on how nature helps heal you, how just being outside can help you process grief. I started actually a travel company for widows and widowers to get people outside and traveling again on their own after losing a spouse. I did that for about 4 or 5 years. And then I decided to take the Pennsylvania Master Naturalist course because, like I said, sciences are not my strong suit, but I love trees and nature. Right. And this was a great way to decide, can I make this a career? Can I do something more with this? And I met an exceptional array of people in that class. That was 10 years ago this year that I took that class. And all of those people have ended up all in senior leadership positions in conservation groups across Pennsylvania. And we all still stay in contact. And I will just say we're changing the conservation world together. I love it. They were instrumental in what I'm doing now and led to me having my career at Chesapeake Bay Foundation. And just, I don't think any of that would have happened without growing up tenting, without traveling, without experiencing the loss of my husband, without hiking on my own, without reconnecting with people. All of these things lead to where I'm at now. And in the moment, each of them was extremely difficult to go through and hard to see the outcome. But pieced together, they're this like amazing mosaic. And when I try to explain it piecemeal of how I got here, it's chaos. It's pure chaos. And putting that on a resume, horrific. Yeah. But in a conversation with someone, it's like, this is who I am, weave together. And this is the journey I'm on, and it makes me so much more passionate about fighting for things in my community. When a pipeline tries to come through our community, that really amplified the need for me to get involved, or like now with data centers, speaking up at town halls and just saying, we need to look at this. And I never want to push people to do something they're uncomfortable doing. I just want them to stop and think about their community and beyond themselves for a little bit.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. I, especially as a emerging professional in this field, it is always so refreshing to hear that the journey was nonlinear to where you are today, and that I have no idea what could happen in the next 10 to 20 years. So thank you for sharing that. And I also really appreciate that you talking about not being so well versed in math and science, but having the other strengths and other backgrounds, because I feel like we're at that point, and probably have been for a while, where all of those, every type of background is helpful in the greater environmental movement. Yeah, it's easy to forget about that when you're looking at a job application or reviewing a policy or something like that. So I think that's just great to hear in general for anyone listening.
I appreciate that.
I guess you said it was a business you created for widows and widowers getting outside more. What are some of the best things that came from that for you, or that you learned about nature through that?
I had already been giving 2 types of talks to local hospice groups and some camp widow groups that I had been part of. And one had been just traveling solo. So because I had done travel on my own prior to even meeting my first husband, I had these tips and tricks that I recommended people. And inherently, when you're in these groups, you're with a lot of older widows and widowers, and I was always typically the youngest person in the room. They would love to hear what tips and tricks I had, and so I would share them. And then over time I got to realize it was not just about the traveling, it was so much about the experience during the travel. And for me, I didn't travel just to see a location. I always incorporated something with nature into it. When I did enough of these talks, so many people, especially women, said, I wish that there was a company that offered something where widows and widowers could go out together. And so I just started asking, would you guys want me to put something together? And I started a company based on that, and really mostly for local people, but it did expand nationwide. And then we did some road trips and we did some flight trips over the course of 4 years. And it was fantastic because we did an Acadia National Park trip. So that one was very nature based. And it was definitely skewed towards an older demographic, which was a stretch for me as well, of going, okay, at that point I was in my 30s and I had to learn how to drive a very large Mercedes-Benz van. Yeah. And driving from Pennsylvania up to Maine and New Brunswick. And I was the tour guide. I was the everything. Right. And most of the people with me were senior age or older than me, either way. And so thinking about like what they needed to be safe on the trip and accessibility and all of those things. And that also shifted my perspective of being in nature as well, of like, how do we get people out into nature in all different ways versus just assuming someone can just hike right out there? What are ways that we can get people to experience this in whatever capacity they have to experience that? Yeah. And that's a question I continue to challenge myself with as I meet people of all different diversities and backgrounds, is like, how do we bring nature to them if they can't get to nature, and vice versa? So that's something I'm constantly pushing towards. And I think that also weaves back to the protection piece, is on those trips. On those trips, it's as much about having them have a good time, but also understand that what they're seeing is like, this is a protected place. This is a beautiful space. Because one of the trips, we went down to the Florida Keys. I had never been before. It was the first time. We did a boat trip out to Dry Tortugas. It is the most tumultuous boat ride you will ever experience in your life. People are throwing up off of the back of the ship. They have guys, young men, consistently walking up and down the boat with bags and ginger ale the entire trip. They are prepared for this. They know it's coming. They know. There's just not even a question. And before you get on the boat, they're hamming out Dramamine. They're like, you need to take this. And I normally get motion sick. And I think something about that day, I was like, I am the tour guide here. I can't. And so
I'm keeping it together.
Yeah. Everything they told me to do, I did, which meant standing the whole time. and just looking straight ahead at the horizon. And I kept it together, but then that allowed me to check on all the women that were with me.
Right.
And finally we got on land. It was much better. But it was such a fantastic experience once we were there, and the pictures of all of us gathering here in this remote place and them going, wow, we've been to the Keys, we've been to Florida, no one's ever taken us here. And so for me, part of that was, how can I get them to experience something different in nature, showing them these public lands that every single person in the United States has access to. We should be enjoying those. So I always try to incorporate those types of things into that. And that's what made it most fun for me. And I hope the most fun for them as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I've never heard of that park. So I love the exposure that I even get talking to people and just learning more places that I should check out eventually.
You must go, but take the Dramamine, please.
Yeah. Okay, will do. I'm curious if you don't mind explaining what a Master Naturalist course is, if people listening might not know what that is and why someone would want to do that.
Sure. So many people, I'm sure, have heard of the Master Gardener program. Penn State has an exceptional Master Gardener program. And especially at the time, I wasn't really into gardening. It just wasn't really my thing. But the Master Naturalist course at the time, 10 years ago, came out. It's a state program. There are several states that offer it as well. And at the time, it was partnered with the Lancaster Conservancy. Now it's partnered with several different other organizations. And typically, we would have class one evening a week at Lancaster County Parks, and then one Saturday a month. It would be like a in-person, all-day, a required field trip where you would go do sampling, taking notes, meeting different lecturers, but typically out in the field. So some of the things that we got to do is we actually went down into a quarry to understand the local geology of Lancaster County and things like that. We went down to the locks, the canal locks along the Susquehanna River, to learn more about the history of that, but then also to identify native sumac. And we actually went with someone who would help us identify what were edible species. So it was a really important class to understand native trees, invasive trees, edible varieties, what to be planting. So we learned a lot about permaculture, especially. So, how to integrate native trees and plants into your landscape, and then also how to get invasives out, and also understanding the balance of that, of not only the cost and the time benefit, but whether it's an urban or a rural area that you're planting in. So you are acting as a gardener in some ways, but it's at a much different scale. It's not so much as your immediate gardens around your house. You're thinking about really the ecoscape around your whole facility. Right. And then, so there's so many hours you need to get your first year to become certified, and then you need to maintain certain hours every year to maintain the certification.
Okay, cool. I didn't know how long it was good for, the X-Spin or
it's
annual,
a year program, and then you have to do annual. And fully transparent, I've not kept up with my annual certification, so I will find it's been such a challenge working in conservation to keep up with the certification. So, it's one of those things, but I highly recommend the program. It is an exceptional learning, body of knowledge. We took so many courses with Millersville University professors, biology professors. So it felt like college level courses that we were getting. And the community connections. And then we each did a program, like an actual volunteer program afterwards. So mine was working with Lancaster Conservancy, and I became one of their trail stewards on the Turkey Hill Trail, and then eventually started helping with National Trails Day Festival for a number of years with them.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I've considered doing it a few times, and your comment earlier about creating that network, that you're all so involved with the conservation community, and okay, I'm sold. I'll do it.
I've encouraged a couple of people to write up about this class of 20 I guess we were technically class of 2017. But yeah, because it's when I look at the list of the people and where they all work and what they do now, I'm like, how did that happen? And it's just cool. It's just cool.
Yeah. What do you want people to know about climate change?
Climate change is not a scary term. This came up very recently because Lancaster County tends to be a more conservative area. So using the word climate change, especially in the communities that I grew up in, is not a term that's readily acceptable, welcome, or really even acknowledged that it exists. So I use it in different ways. So I use examples because I think that's the best way to explain it. So I wrote a blog recently and I purposely did not use the term climate change at all because you have to know your audience. And my audience in that case was the people I grew up with in Lancaster County, who, if I put the term climate change in, would shut down immediately. But by talking about the Mount Joy storm that we had in 2018, where 10 inches of rain came down in a number of hours, and Main Street was flooded, and a mobile home park flooded, and Route 283 flooded. People remember that.
Right.
When I talk about last summer, videos of a stream going around our house that never exists. When I talk about droughts, when I talk about severe thunderstorms, we talk about the freak storm that happened just a couple weeks ago, the straight line winds that took down oak trees that are 100 years old, that people can grasp onto because they see it. And whether or not they believe it's cyclical or it's bound to happen, they can choose to believe what they want. But us in the science community, we see the patterns and we know it's climate change and we know what's causing it. So my hope is, don't have it be a scary thing. Admit that something is changing. And can we just look at the basics of our actions and our impact and agree that we can do better? So blame and shame does not get us anywhere in this world. And so I can constantly ask my neighbors to do this or to do that or not do this or that. But I would much rather welcome them to the table and offer them resources and say, hey, this is a better way to be a steward to your land or a better neighbor in your community. And that resonates so much more than by coming at them and saying, climate change is killing this and getting the shutdown. I've had to give up some of those idealistic thoughts that things are not black and white. And we need to live more in the gray and the acceptability of just this world and meeting people where they're at when we can. It's not always possible, but if we can, I think we should.
With your experience of kind of adjusting to your audience and the things you've been talking about, do you feel like your coworkers or other leaders in the conservation field are doing similar things? Is that like a growing behavior of, I guess, figuring out what's next or how to implement solutions?
I think it depends on the organization, to be quite honest. I think that there's a learning curve between, and this is where me not having as much of a math science background and more of a communications background of we need to sell it to people in a different way than in science and facts, because people don't believe facts anymore. So just taking it down to its simplest form. So how do we bring it to the table in a way that they're going to want to serve it up? And I see some organizations that are like, we are going to work in our community, we are going to adjust and make it happen. And then I see some who are, these are our standards and we are never faltering from that. And I respect both of those because I think both need to exist to keep certain standards, ethics, science moving forward, and both need to exist, but they're going to pull in different audiences.
For sure. And
I think we just need to be aware of where to send people for resources. I wouldn't send an Amish farmer to a heavily national nonprofit that only does litigation, right? It's finding the match of resources. And I think that's where, when you're in a community of conservationists, you're having those conversations and going, hey, who is the best organization to offer this? And then you can help make that happen for them.
Yeah, those are great points. And I think that shows the importance of having those communities where you can talk to the other leaders and you can really come up with a good game plan, because it's all of us that are being affected, and regardless of what you think or if you want to blame somebody else, I think we should all realize that, what am I trying to say? Just be more humane about it.
Yes.
Because I'm only 25 and I already feel like I've seen so many shifts of going from blame to accountability to neither of those things. It's just so interesting once you start paying attention to how certain people react or what they respond to. So I'm saying a lot of vague things, but I hope it makes sense.
It does. The shift is happening, and I think if we can look at more of these things in community, then in contrast, it will make such a difference in how we achieve progress. In my recent township meeting that I attended, they were adopting a data center language to basically prevent data centers from wanting to come into their township. They had a really good structure for the zoning ordinance that they were putting in place. But I still had questions for them, and I wanted them to define certain things. And at the end of it, the one township supervisor came up and spoke to me individually about his thoughts, and I appreciated it. I said, I'm sharing my thoughts, and no animosity. We were actually both there with the same exact goals of prevention, and just going, our goal is we want to keep this community in farmland and in preservation and conservation as much as possible to prevent this from happening before it comes in and then it's too late. And so if we can look at those things, and we may be at opposite ends of the table, but we have the same goals, it will help us so much more than going, you're not using this term and you have to use this term. I don't want us to get stuck on that.
Are there any final thoughts that you would like to leave with the audience, or just, something that helps you continue at this work constantly?
It's something I was thinking about when you mentioned that you're early in your career and still figuring out how to move from implementation into advocacy, or trying to find the right fit in the career. And I'm 42 and still feeling that way. When people tell me this, even in their 50s and 60s, I'm like, okay, I feel a little less anxious now of trying to find myself. And at one point, I was very embarrassed by my background of going, I dropped out of school and I did this and I did that. But to keep going says something, and to keep wanting to learn and to grow says something. So I think there's nothing wrong with being a career person and staying in one place and doing exceptional work for a lifetime. I think there is great things to that. And I think that there's also nothing wrong with being someone who is constantly aspiring for more and trying to do different things and change things, and never look at that as a bad thing, and always keep reaching for those things and those goals that you have.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Nature with You. If you're interested in more content, search Nature with You on Instagram or Facebook, or look at more episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube.